Beep, 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 beep. Morning. Right, okay. Oh dear. Enjoy yourselves. It's later than you think. Good morning, good people. How are we? Right, what have we got for you today? The teen mental illness epidemic. Right. Yeah. Okay, so there's a link to this in the Dubras. This is from a Substack. I've already sent it to my, cross-posted to my Substack readers. This is from Zach Rausch and John Haidt, and it's really worth having a look at, okay? Because it's about the mental health problems of teenagers, because their mental health seems to have fallen off the cliff. And that's obviously partly a reason why they're inventing these confected identities is due to mental ill health, if you want to call it that, or in this case, as they do, mental illness and mental health. Well, there's a problem there, right? So mental illness is a thing, right? Believe me, okay? It's a thing. And people that suffer with mental illness are obviously in need of great help. I know more than one psychiatrist and mental health nurse, and these people are terribly, terribly ill, and nobody would say otherwise. But then there's what we now call mental health. Yeah, right, okay? Which is really just, I think, a guise under which to sell cobblers like, mindfulness, or whatever they call it. What have they named it all now? Unconscious bias is now named part of well-being and cultural competence, and all the cobblers that they talk about, that they've just simply stuffed all the usual psychobabble nonsense into one bag, right? So on one end you've got people who are terribly ill, and on the other end you've got these cowboys that are selling this nonsense. About mental health and your mental health, and be offended by everything, trigger warnings, and all the usual bollocks. So there's your bookends, right? Seriously ill people, terribly ill people, often a danger to themselves and sometimes a danger to others, but rarely. And at the other end, cowboys going, "You're all bloody mental, buy this snake oil," right? Okay, so there's that. And when you come to look at what's happening in the psychology industry, the provision of mental health care, the NHS is captured completely with some of this nonsense. You then have a situation whereby people who work as therapists, people who give a damn, you wouldn't be a therapist if you didn't, people who work as counsellors or as mental health nurses or as doctors specialising in perhaps schizophrenia or anorexia or any other kind of body dysmorphia, that kind of thing, are rather stuck between a rock and a hard place because, like the rest of us, they get lumped in with the nutters, right? So nutters, clowns to the left of me, all that stuff. No, because that's the good people to the left of me. What am I saying this early in the morning? So, yes, get it? Bookends, mental, serious problem. Yeah, not ill, not well. Other end, lunatic snake oil sales. Okay, so how does one negotiate that? It's a really difficult thing to negotiate. Well, I've had a conversation with a few people, and there's a number of organisations such as GenSpect and Thoughtful Therapist and various other organisations around the world who are working to ensure that they can get rid of the cowboys. Boy, are they going to have to work hard to do that. I know that the education industry has been trying to do that for years and we haven't been able to. So, in this particular article, which I think is terribly interesting, they're asking the question, why did the mental health epidemic, why has mental health in teens gone off the damn radar? Plummeted. And it's not that it's just happening in the UK, for example, it's happening all over the place, all over the Western world, right? And he lays it firmly at the door, in part, of social media, right? Of social media. And that's what makes this so interesting. This is the kind of thing we discuss on the programme, the Winning a Mindset programme. Warrior Teachers Assemble. So he's gone to look at what's happening in the UK to see what we've got in terms of anxiety and depression, for example, in 11 to 15-year-olds. I do recommend you read the whole article. I'm only going to give you a brief overview of what it is here, because I think it's worth us engaging with this, because I think a lot of what they're calling mental health problems are actually educational problems. They're intellectual problems. They're not mental health problems. It's because the kids are thick, right? It's because we've got a lot of thick kids following, ridiculous trends online, and we haven't told them how to use social media yet. It's our fault, mind. Don't go looking for blame elsewhere. Each one of us takes blame for this, no matter who you are. So, they used the United Kingdom National Health Survey and examined trends among 11 to 15-year-old English boys and girls for anxiety and depressive disorders. Okay? There was a rigorous, detailed and consistent method to assess various types of disorders according to the International Classification of Disease diagnostic criteria. Anxiety disorders, depressive orders. And this has brought about the following information. In 1999, it was at one level, and in 2017, it was at another. So in 2017, they looked back to 2004. So the first 5 years of records they ignored, and they looked at 2004, and anxiety in girls increased 61.7%. Right, according to this. Anxiety in boys increased 77.1%. That's interesting, isn't it? And depression in girls increased 137.5%. This is horrific, right? And depression in boys increased 60.0%. Prior to that, the first 5 years, fairly steady, right? 2004 to 2017, a substantial increase in what happened. Same goes for happiness. The decline in happiness in girls and boys. Boys is down 4% since 2010, girls 8% since 2010, which makes us question what the hell is going on. Self-harm since 2010 in girls is up 78%. Here comes the killer. In boys, it's up 134%. Very strange indeed. It strikes me as we've got some things that are wrong, and it strikes John Haidt as it's the same. I mean, if you haven't read John's book, it's well worth reading. I'm going to put the links downstairs in the doobras for this, just so that you can have a look. I think it's something that we need to talk about. And I think that we need a compilation of things. We need a kind of triage to help some of these young people. And that triage should decide, first of all, whether what is going on is a social, cultural, intellectual, or actually a medical phenomenon. And the concern here is that we medicalise it. That's my concern. And the opposite end, another bookend for you, is that we intellectualise it. So we've got to be very careful that we don't do either. We must also recognise that cultures are changing at a swifter rate than they have previously. I don't believe anybody under 13 should have access to smartphones and the internet. It's that simple, right? I think there should be a walled garden, right, that they can go and explore, which is absolutely directly related to the national curriculum. That would be my way of thinking. But it's not necessarily going to be enforceable because we've now got the internet, in which case we've got to teach these kids how to use it and understand that that the vast majority of it is just simply advertising billboards lining the superhighway. So where's the education aspect of this? Where is the cultural understanding aspect? Where is the social aspect? Because after all, the only thing that prevents most of the emptiness that we feel is each other. How do we enable young people to understand that the fact that they make friends and are together is far more important than what's on their bloody phone? So this is a task, a monumental task that faces us. And it just doesn't face, psychologists and therapists and counsellors and social workers and teachers. And we're all faced with this. We've all got to wake up to what's going on because we need to start giving them a narrative that will enable them to live with such information waterfalls as we live with now. The constant torrential fall of this bloody nonsense onto young people and onto most of us, frankly. I mean, you've got to look at Twitter for half an hour to recognise the amount of garbage that's spouted on there, including by my good self. You're getting rows and scraps. And so what do? Is it an intellectual problem? Is it a problem of culture? Is it a problem socially? Is it a problem of communities? Is it a problem of mental health? The rush to mental health bothers me. Jonathan calls it reverse CBT, which is what they're teaching in the schools, and I think he's probably right. I imagine that this wouldn't take much to change for the vast majority. And those that are actually mentally ill, rather than being told they have bad mental health, can then be treated accordingly by the medical establishment, and the others can be given whatever they require, which I imagine would be lessons. Here's the truth, right? And you could start with reality and truth. Let's talk about reality and truth, because that's got to be the best way to get them started. And teach them what it's like to be sent down a wormhole, to fall for something, and then having to realise that you have to backpedal, and how dangerous it is not to backpedal, but to entrench yourself in thinking that you know to be blatantly wrong. And I think there's an awful lot of illness coming from that. They're entrenching themselves in thinking that they know to be wrong. Okay? Because they're doing it to be socially accepted by the rest of the lunatics that are still doing the same thing. So, That's what I would suggest that we start thinking about. There's also something about the fall and decline in the health of young people when we attack meritocracy and the ability to get on and the strive to do something with yourself and not be a bloody wastrel, you know? I think we have to start building into young people's lives difficulties, surmountable difficulties, but we have to give them a much greater view of how hard life can be, and we've got to make them feel much smaller and less safe. But I'll be interested to hear what you think, right? Because that's what I think we should do. Make them feel much smaller and less safe. We need to frighten them a bit more and coddle them a bit less. Ta-da! Go and have a look. It's a really good article. Ta-da!